to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I ready to break down the entire playoff picture. Now, the Honda West Division still yet to be decided as of our recording. It is 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May the 12th. So we don't yet know for sure if Vegas is playing St. Louis and Colorado is playing Minnesota. That could potentially flip. But we will break down all the other divisions, talk about the potentials in that one, and later on we'll throw out a quick emergency show to break down the Honda West Division. Before, Justin, we break down every playoff series in the National Hockey League playoffs this year. Any thoughts on teams that missed the playoffs that you were disappointed in?
Yeah, I got to say the one team I was disappointed in more than any other, mostly because I picked them to make the playoffs, were the New York Rangers. And I think maybe management felt the same way because they cleared house today.
Yes, they did. For the second time, they've cleared house.
Yeah, for the second time. Yeah, for those who haven't heard yet. So they, the Rangers recently, got rid of their management upstairs, but today got rid of, Mr. Quinn behind the bench and 3 assistants. So it looks like it's full on the Chris Drury show moving forward.
Yeah, my vote is for John Tortorella 2.0. That's where I'm going.
Oh my gosh, yes. And
that would be wonderful.
Not only that too, but in case you haven't seen it, Vegas released their odds for teams most likely to land Jack Eichel this offseason, and the Rangers were number 1.
Yeah. Oh, baby. We'll see. We will see.
Oh, baby. Panarin and Eichel, can you imagine?
I want to. I want to imagine, and I'm thrilled that a team that I like is not in their division. So right. if that were to happen. Now, granted, the Rangers would have to give something up. My guess is it's Capo Keiko, to be honest, if they're going to
at the very least.
That move. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to the playoff matches. Why don't we start in the Central Division, where I think the 1-4 Carolina-Nashville is a fascinating series in its own right because of the way Nashville's played down the stretch, the way Carolina has really played all year long. They've just been the model of consistency. This series is going to be fun, but as just a little side note, I love that the 4 teams that are going to be in the playoffs in this division are all teams that have been in the league for less than 30 years. Some of them have been in the league even less than that, closer to 20. It's just fun to see some of these Southern teams doing well and actually having a really great following, and the league is really growing in the South. 15 years ago, if you had these series in the Central, you would have a lot of people going, well, great, nobody's going to watch these. And now that is just not the case. And so I think that's something to celebrate, that our game is growing. But Carolina, Nashville, what are your initial thoughts in this series?
Well, initially you got to look at, again, Carolina, right? The model of consistency, just playing super well throughout the entire season. They really just embody Rod Brind'Amour, who I think is probably my favorite right now for the Jack Adams. But oddly enough, though, as hot and as good and these jerks have been throughout the entire season, they go in their final 2 games here against Nashville and just get tanked 5-0 a couple days ago and lost 3-1 a few days prior to that. So you got to think maybe momentum, maybe Nashville's feeling good going into this playoff series, saying, hey, we've shown we can beat these guys. Now, on the flip side of that, I think Carolina, again, while they would have liked to have ran away with that, I think maybe they were, I don't want to say rope-a-doping a little bit, but maybe they weren't going, full out for the entire 60 minutes, whereas Nashville really fighting for their playoff lives, to keep Dallas at bay.
Sure. Yeah. And Nashville really, the only actual playoff competition for a spot. Every other division you have Montreal up 9 points on the Flames. That could be a little bit less if the Flames go on a tear here at the end, but it's a moot point. The Rangers 11 points back of the Islanders. The the Coyotes 5 points back of the Blues, but that can be up to 9 points if they win their last two, St. Louis. Whereas, man, Nashville just barely squeaking by Dallas, only 4 points up, and really that was decided just a few days ago that Nashville was going to steal that playoff spot. So where they were, 6 weeks ago even, I think you had a lot of people saying that they were going to sell the farm. And here they are in the playoffs against the Carolina Hurricanes. I think the thing that interests me the most with the goaltending position is, Carolina has 3 goaltenders that could play, 2 that are likely to probably James Reimer's your third guy, and Nedeljkovic and Mrazek are going to, probably Mrazek gets the nod, but we don't know that yet. And this is really if Carolina has one area where you'll look at and you go, ooh, I don't know if that guy can win you a cup. It's that goaltending position. Whereas you look on the other side, and the Nashville Predators, Juuse Saros has been fantastic all year long. He has disproven the haters that he's not going to be a number one goalie. He's absolutely a number one goalie. But you know what? If anything happens to him, you just have Pekka Rinne sitting right behind him. So Carolina's weakness, if you want to call it that, a weakness, maybe their far lesser strength, I call it a weakness, is Nashville's by far their biggest strength.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you got to kind of give that checkbox to Nashville just slightly, in my opinion. Saros is going to be interesting to watch in the playoffs. I know last year, before Mrazek went down with injury, man, he was on fire through 5 games, a .929 save percentage. And I think with Carolina playing their type of hockey they do, I honestly think you could probably throw either one of these goalies in there and be all right. Now, if one of them tanks, obviously, yes, then you go to the other guy, right? But if they just play some above average, good goaltending, I think with this system and the team Carolina's got in front of them, man, they'll do just fine.
Yeah, I'd say though that with Nashville's goaltending being such a strength and their defensive side of the game, anyways, with Roman Josi back there, anything's possible. When I look at these. At what might be considered the biggest division between talents with teams, you're probably either going Carolina, Nashville, or Toronto, Montreal in terms of star power on one team versus the other. But Nashville, all it takes is for a goalie to get hot. You can win a series with a goalie that is just playing out of his mind, and that would be, to me, the only way that Carolina really loses this series.
No, I agree. And it's funny. I look at every single one of these series in the entire NHL spectrum anyways. Outside of, there's one team, I think, that really doesn't have a goalie that I think could steal a series. I think the rest of these teams potentially have goaltenders that could step in and steal a series. Now, the one team I am talking about, maybe we'll get to a little bit later, but yeah, I think, again, like you said, Nashville, they've got Rinne sitting back there, and we've seen him steal plenty of series. So if Nashville gets in trouble, they get down a couple of games, Rinne steps in, and, he could go lights out. And next thing you know, Carolina's, driving home. A little sad there. So
yeah, ultimately, it just doesn't seem like Nashville in a 7-game series. Now, I don't think that this is going to be a cakewalk for Carolina. But I also don't see Nashville winning more than 2 games, if that. But just based on, Roman Josi's had a fantastic year. There's no doubt about that. But now in the playoffs, if you can shut Roman Josi down, which if all your defensive mindset is surrounded in shutting down one player, a playoff series is much different than the regular season. You can really shut down Nashville's offense from the defensive, from that back end.
Yeah, and we know. Let's face it. Carolina's got plenty of defenders that can skate, can move the puck, and defend pretty well. So, and especially if Dougie Hamilton, who's in a contract year, gets going, I mean, look out. It's funny. I actually read a nice little stat today. Talk about one of the more underrated defensemen in the NHL who doesn't get a lot of love, but in the last 7 years, he is the only defenseman to score goals in double digits every single year. John Carlson, Victor Hedman, Zach Werenski, these goal-scoring defensemen haven't done it, but it's been Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina just has. It's almost. What's the best way to describe Carolina? I mean, Carolina is a team that even like 5 years ago, when we first started our podcast in 2017, the Hurricanes were kind of that like, oh, I'd love to see them make the playoffs. And I can see how they can be really good. Now they are that good. They're the way that kind of people saw them transforming into. They're just incredibly consistent. They're fast. They can score. They don't give up much. I mean, they lost 3 games at home in regulation out of 28. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the hard part about going into Carolina is the fact that, they do play so well at home. But I will say, I think I heard Nashville just got approved to have 12,000 people in their arena.
Yes, they
so
did.
That is going to give a big boost to the Preds. And we know from that playoff run in 2016 when they went against the Pittsburgh Penguins there, we know how important that crowd is. Like, that crowd just takes things to a different level that really no other arena does. So if they can get something going with that crowd, kind of get that, sixth man kind of deal in there, maybe Nashville can pull something off, at least make it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you because, for the last year, we've been limited to small crowds or no crowds of any kind at a lot of these arenas. And so any kind of boost you can get, especially from a home crowd right now, when you're getting that much of an attendance number inside your arena, oh man, it's going to do numbers for the Nashville Predators at home.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, just as a interesting little tidbit, the Central Division, no matter from top to bottom, Carolina all the way down to the Columbus Blue Jackets, no one has a losing record at home. No one.
Wow.
Even the Blue Jackets, 11-9-8. Now, granted, they lost more than they won on home ice, but they still managed that point. So, in terms of points percentage, no one has a losing record at home in the Central Division, which is pretty amazing. That's pretty close in the North. Vancouver 12-12-2, but Winnipeg 12-13-2 at home. So nobody even close. That's just a random thing I just noticed. All right, let's give your prediction here. Carolina, Nashville. Yeah. Where do you think this one's going?
So 7-game series. I mean, I got to take Carolina, right? They're just these jerks are too good, in my opinion, back and front. I think they get it done, and probably I'm going to go 5 games.
Okay, yeah, that's you got to think Nashville can snag one in Nashville. I mean, you hope with that crowd. And I mean, obviously they've played them well throughout the year. So, yeah, I'm going to say that it's Carolina, but I think that it's going to actually be much closer than people think that it will be. Nashville has been playing playoff hockey for a while now. I mean, they've been playing playoff hockey for 2 months, trying to recoup this and get back into the playoffs. I think that will play a factor. You could see how maybe later in the series they'll be worn out because of having to play that way. I'm going to go Carolina in 7.
Okay. Wow.
I think Nashville is able to push it because of their goaltending and being in that playoff mindset, head right in. They're the underdogs. There's no pressure on Nashville at all to do anything. So I think that's a good place to be. But Carolina ultimately will take that in 7. All right, let's go Florida, Tampa Bay, the battle of the Sunshine State. We finally get it.
For it.
They've both been in the league since like 93? 92,
forever
93,
now.
I think, is the first year. Something along those lines. I think that's Tampa's first year is 92, 93. Then Florida was 93, 94, something. Anyways.
I think you're correct.
So it's been 27 years, something like that, 28 years. And they've been in the same division the whole time. Like every single year, every single time they've been in the same division. So there's been every opportunity for them to play in the playoffs, especially since the new playoff setup with the 2-3s. But we finally get it. And I think this is the first time in a very long time that I honestly could say, I think I like the Florida Panthers better than the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Wow. Now, mind you, Tampa Bay is getting Steven Stamkos and Kucherov back for these playoffs. So, even if they're not 100%, you still think Florida, can pull it off here? My goodness.
I think that Kucherov, the guy's coming in totally cold. It's going to be really hard for him to be really effective. Now, granted, is he still a top 6 forward in that shape? I'm sure he is. Steven Stamkos, I'm sure, will get hurt by game 4. So that the guy just, I'm sorry, he just can't stay healthy. Really has never been able to stay healthy, especially since breaking his freaking leg on the post. That was like the beginning of his terrible injury stuff. It just kept happening. I just love the way that Florida plays. I love the way they move the puck. I would love them more with Aaron Ekblad, but I think that the Florida Panthers have something special happening. Tampa Bay, they won the cup last year. It's been kind of a weird year. I think it's pretty safe to say that the way they've been playing just looks like, all right, all we need to do is get in, and then we'll kind of ramp it up. But I really like the way that the Florida Panthers play. They've got kind of this cast-off mentality. They've got players that other teams didn't want. How good has Sam Bennett looked in a Florida Panthers jersey? Like, that guy has a new lease on life playing for the Panthers. It's wonderful to see. And in 10 games, he has 15 points with the Panthers.
This guy's got a whole, like you said, a whole new lease on life, right? And not only that, but Florida now has depth, right? You talk about a one-trick pony with Barkov and Huberdeau. Now they've got guys that you have to really worry about on that second and third line.
Yeah, Carter Verhaeghe has been awesome for them. 36 points, 18 goals in 43 games. And there is something you gotta look. You look up and down this roster. Obviously, there's the one thing there is sort of this lack of a ton of experience outside of, I guess, Verhaeghe has playoff experience. But you look up and down their lineup, and even like a veteran guy like you've got a Keith Yandel, but a lot of these guys haven't really spent a lot of time in the playoffs, except Patrick Hornqvist. And I think that, Patrick Hornqvist had still a good year. 32 points in 44 games, 14 goals in his first year with the Florida Panthers. But I think this is when Patrick Hornqvist shines. Like, we've seen it every playoff. This guy can come and make a huge difference. And he's the one guy that I look to for the Florida Panthers to have a huge series.
Yeah, the other factor that I'm curious to, I guess, dive into a little bit is goaltending, right? Obviously, Bobrovsky's going to be the go-to guy here, and Vasilevsky on the other side. Now, we know Vasi can easily steal everything from Florida. And when you look at the tail of the tape for these two teams during the regular season, right, they're evenly matched up and down when they played each other. Through 6 games, Tampa Bay went 3-3 against Florida. Tampa Bay scores 23 goals, and Florida scores 22. So you've got a pretty even team here. But the difference to me, obviously, is when I look at the back end, right? Obviously, no Aaron Ekblad. That's going to kind of hurt them. What kind of production are they going to get? from their back end, besides a guy named Mackenzie Weegar, which, I mean, who would have freaking guessed he would put up these kind of numbers this season? But obviously Keith Yandel is going to be Keith Yandel. I love his game, and he's fun to watch. But I think they're really going to miss Aaron Ekblad, and so Bobrovsky's going to have to step up a little bit, and I think he's going to have to steal a game or two from Tampa, especially with getting Stamkos and Kucherov back, because this is a Tampa Bay team that, surprisingly didn't have a single guy at a point per game pace, which normally they you either hear a Braden Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, one of these guys always firing off and at the top of the leaderboard in terms of points, and nowhere to be found. So they've been pretty decimated there at in that aspect. But I mean, Florida's just been they've been fun to watch up front. These guys are just, like you said, Sam Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe. I mean, these guys are just fun to watch. So it's just going to be, I think, a fun series. And
who would have thought that Carter Verhaeghe was going to come in and put up 36 points in 43 games? I mean, over the course of an 82-game season, that's a 70-point season.
Yeah.
This is what Carter Verhaeghe, a guy who, I mean, last season with
goal scoring guy.
Yeah. Just it's fun. I mean, a 3rd-round pick, actually by the Leafs in 2013. But yeah, just definitely unexpected. Now, one thing with Tampa, here's my biggest concern. I think Victor Hedman is hurt. I think we've found out that Hedman's kind of been hurt for a while, and the Lightning with an injured Hedman, and if Hedman goes down at all, like if he can't play at all, the Lightning are done. Like, we're looking at Columbus 2.0 in my mind. Victor Hedman is, like, for all the talent, there's a reason why, Kucherov goes out, Stamkos misses 18 games, and the Lightning still finish just 4 points back of second place in this division. Like, there was no worries. Tampa Bay was not going to miss the playoffs because those guys were out. However, if Victor Hedman had been out, I don't know if that were to be true. Now, granted, this division is quite bad, so there's also that. Like the 4 teams that missed the playoffs, other than Dallas, you can make an argument. I mean, Dallas just didn't look very good, especially without Tyler Seguin all year. But the rest of them, over the course of a 56 game or 82, whatever, these teams weren't going to make the playoffs. So Tampa Bay didn't have a whole lot to deal with, and they make the playoffs pretty easily. But if Hedman is down, this team is a very different team. A very different team.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, Tampa does play a little different when Hedman's not the guy there. But, I mean, when you look at this depth on the blue line, McDonough, Sergachev, David Savard, who they brought in, I mean, they've got enough talent back there. I think they can probably get by.
Well, Justin, what happened the last time Victor Hedman got injured?
I know. It's gonna be tough for this. I mean, this is gonna be a dogfight. Every single game is gonna be close. I think a 1-goal game, overtime. I mean, we're gonna see a lot of it, I think, in this series, and it's gonna go down to the wire.
Okay, now you think that Sergei Bobrovsky gets the nod?
Yes.
Not Chris Driedger, who has statistically been significantly better.
Yes, and I completely agree. But I think, again, there's going to be a short leash for Bobrovsky. I think, 2 games in, if they are down 2-0, they're going to go to Chris Driedger. No questions about it. I think, obviously, like you said, his stats have been a little bit better. But, let's be honest here. I think moving forward, Quenneville knows he has to show some faith in Sergei Bobrovsky because he's going to be the guy moving forward because, Driedger's he's going to get signed somewhere else this offseason. Spencer Knight's going to come up and be the backup. And so you got to, you basically tell Bobrovsky, hey, you're our guy moving forward. We know that. And so, we're going to start you.
Yeah. I don't disagree with, obviously, Bobrovsky's going to be with the Panthers for another 5 years at $10 million. There's nothing you can do about that. Spencer Knight, at least you've got the insurance policy of knowing that Spencer Knight is your third guy. I mean, if anything happened to either one of them, or both of them, Spencer Knight could still step in. I mean, the guy was 4-0, so he played pretty well as well. But
he could be this year's Thatcher Demko, right? I mean,
sure. I mean, the way that goalies go down in this league nowadays, you just never know. But I agree. I feel like you have to give Bobrovsky the start because otherwise you're going, well, maybe we'll start you again next year if we don't have someone better than you. So you kind of have to start him, and then you can kind of play it by, okay, well, obviously you're struggling right here, so it's okay if we play somebody else. We can always rehabilitate this later. But this situation reminds me a little bit of Vancouver when they had Roberto Luongo and Corey Schneider, where you knew, and Luongo knew, hey, you have like 2 bad games and you're done. Like the other guy's coming in, and it'll be interesting to see if anything like that happens. But at the same time, you got to think this is why they brought in Sergei Bobrovsky. Not to do decent in the regular season, but to win in the playoffs, which he has done before, and he has beaten the Tampa Bay Lightning in a 7-game series very recently. In fact, he's the only goalie to beat Tampa Bay in a 7-game series within the last couple years. So, who are you picking for this series? I'd say this is a hard one.
Yeah, you could honestly flip a coin, and I wouldn't argue with either one. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I've got to take experience. I've got to take the last year's run into account and say that Tampa pulls this off in 7. I think they've just got enough guys getting Stamkos and Kucherov back with the experience, with the championship rings, that they know what it takes. And I think Florida, this is going to be a great series for them just to show, hey, we're a legit threat moving forward. And especially with Sam Bennett in there too, I think it's going to really push Tampa to 7.
7 games, okay. So you're going Tampa in 7, and
yes, sir.
I think I'm going to go 7 games too, but I'm going Florida.
All right.
Couple of game 7s here in the Central Division via my predictions. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. I just think exactly the reason that you said Tampa Bay, the experience and winning the cup last year, that's a factor in why I think Tampa Bay might lose, because they just went through this grind. It was such a weird experience. This year's been so weird. I just think that it's going to be, if there is a year where it would be incredibly difficult to repeat, it would be this one. This one might be the hardest, because I feel like after everything that some of these teams have had to endure, and now granted, I guess the Florida teams, they've had it's been a little bit better in Florida than it has been in some other places, but you got to think these teams that make the playoffs, they're going to go like, I am not letting this last year just go to waste. I'm not just gonna lose in the first round after all that we had to endure because of COVID. Like, I'm gonna make these playoffs count. So I think you're gonna see a lot of balls to the walls kind of playing. So
love it.
That's why I'm picking the Florida Panthers. Which division would you like to go to next there? The North or the East?
Oh boy, let's save the North for last. I want to save your Toronto series for last year.
All right, that's fair. Okay, well let's go to the Mass Mutual East. Mass Mutual, we expect the check in the mail. The Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the New York Islanders for the second time in 2 years. Your thoughts initially on this rematch of the 2019-20 season? No, 2018-19. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, we know how it went last time, but I got to say this time around, these look like 2 totally different teams. I think obviously we know Pittsburgh's been on fire lately. They've been hot in all areas. They've gotten Evgeny Malkin back towards the end of the season. That's just looked incredible. Not to mention, I mean, Crosby and Gensel look just unstoppable right now. They just seem to be the dynamic duo that we've seen in Pittsburgh years prior with Crosby when they've made those cup runs. And so, this Islanders team, though, oddly enough, when they lost their captain Anders Lee and he went down, and they went out and they made a move to get Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac, it just hasn't really panned out the way I thought it was going to. And I think everybody thought it was going to probably go pretty well, right? I think Kyle Palmieri looked like the guy that was going to fit in really well with the squad. He was like a Barry Trotz type of player. And honestly, he just hasn't looked very dominant. Through 17 games, only 4 points, 2 goals. I mean, I know you mentioned it too before, that you think Palmieri's on his way out. He's, on a downturn, downhill, whatever you want to call it. And honestly, I think, this is maybe he's showing signs of, his age here, or, his style of play, because he does like to go a little physical, a little harder. I just honestly, it's the tale of two different tapes, right? I think when you look at the season series against each other, Pittsburgh 6-2 against the Islanders. They've scored 25 goals and allowed 19. So, oddly enough, though, the funny part is when you look at the leading scores for both teams, obviously Matthew Barzal for the Islanders, but Chris Letang for Pittsburgh with 9 points through these 8 games. So, obviously we know Pittsburgh's going to try to play an offensive style of game, whereas the Islanders are going to try to shut you down defensively and try to win them 2-1, 1-0. So whose style is going to come out on top really is the big question mark for me.
Yeah, I think the comparison with Pittsburgh 2 years ago, I think what's happened is their depth has just gone through the roof. I mean, a couple years ago, you didn't have Kasperi Kapanen putting up 30 points in 40 games. You didn't have Jared McCann, basically on pace for a 60-point season.
And freaking Jeff Carter. How about Jeff Carter right now?
Jeff Carter has been such a breath of fresh air for that team. 9 goals in 14 games. Yeah, that 4-goal game was crazy. I mean,
but still,
even like I like Mark Jankowski. This team is just better built. I mean, than teams in the past. I think obviously you win a couple cups in a row, and you have to trade away draft picks, and you're losing players like Patrick Hornqvist. You lose, and there's guys that you wish you could keep, but you just can't because you got to pay other players. And I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins they had a couple down years, and now, I mean, honestly, as well with Chris Letang, this might be the first season where I think I can honestly say, hey, Chris Letang's healthy.
Yeah.
in a long time, maybe in 5 years. It's been a while since you watched him play and you felt like he was the best player on the ice at times. Like, I mean, he hasn't played. The last time he played close to 80 games was 17-18. He played 79 games. I mean, since then, last year he missed 21. The year before, 17. He just has a 16-17. He missed half the year. I mean, it's just been a while since he's played this way, but been healthy. But also the way that he's been playing. He has 45 points in 55 games. That's great, but it's been even more than that. The way that the competition that he's playing up against, he's playing against the best every night, and he's had to do more this year than I think he has had to in the past. And I think that he's kind of a found himself again. And I look to Chris Letang to be the difference maker in this series against the Islanders. I think that he is going to be that good. I mean, that on top of, Sidney Crosby. And I don't think the Islanders have an answer for Crosby at this point. I think that Crosby will be able to find himself here in this playoff series, and they will win a round for the first time in a little while since they won the Cup, I think, right?
Yeah, the one thing that does kind of scare me when you talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins, we know, again, a healthy Letang, healthy forwards up front that are scoring and producing in good depth, but the goaltending, right? Tristan Jarry, he had 1 game of playoff experience last year, and that's it, right? So when you look at the other end, you've got Semyon Varlamov, who last year through 20 games, went down to the wire against the Lightning and put up a .921 save percentage. He looked phenomenal all playoffs last year.
Well, and he's been phenomenal all year. I mean, he is like, I don't think quite Vezina Trophy deserving, but he's pretty darn close. Like
and he's that team's MVP. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, and
I agree.
Jarry on the opposite end. I mean, he's been okay this year, but is okay going to win you a series? That's what concerns me. Yeah,
I guess also I'm just going, man, if Evgeny Malkin has just not, he hasn't been great this year, but he still has 28 points in 33 games. So it's not like he can't produce. in his last 5 games, he's got 5 points. Like he's been doing pretty decent. I think he might be able to find another level here in the playoffs. Like, can Evgeny Malkin elevate himself one last time? Because there's a chance here that this is Evgeny Malkin's last playoff run with the Penguins. I really believe that. I think there's a legitimate chance that Evgeny Malkin is dealt in the offseason. I mean, you look,
wow.
he'll have 1 year left on his deal. It won't be impossible to move him. I think they might try to move him depending on what happens here in this playoff run. Now, okay, if the Penguins go, they win the cup, Malkin has a great series. I think, maybe they try to sell at his high point, but they probably go, we can go on one more run with Malkin kind of thing. But
yeah, I mean, good thing for Pittsburgh is they don't have any big name UFAs or RFAs that need contracts, so they're not up against a cap crunch too either, so they don't have to deal in the offseason.
Right, exactly. But I do think that this is there's a chance. There's a chance that either way, next year's probably Malkin's last year in Pittsburgh. My guess is that he after he's a UFA, he'll go somewhere else. I mean, granted, he'll be 35 at the end of next year, so it'll be interesting to see
if
what the Penguins.
He heads back to Russia.
Sure. Yeah, that's always a possibility with these Russians, especially with Putin calling. This year's just been weird. But all that to be said, who are you picking in this series?
Yeah, I think ultimately, goaltending aside, I like what I see out of Pittsburgh's forward group, their depth, their defense. I just like everything about them better. Again, outside of the goaltending, now maybe if you come down to coaches, I'll definitely take Barry Trotz, but ultimately I think Pittsburgh gets it done in 6.
Okay. I'm going Pittsburgh in 5. I'm saying that this one is a quick series. As much as I like Semyon Varlamov, I also really like what the Penguins are doing. I think that they're going to kind of avenge themselves from the last time that they played the Islanders, and they will make quick work of these Islanders, despite Barry Trotz's excellent coaching. I think that they, although, at home they have been pretty darn good. So both teams, 22 wins for Pittsburgh, 21 for the Islanders at home. So it's going to be a tough win, a tough out in the Islanders barn, but I'm going Pittsburgh in 5. Right. Let's go the Washington Capitals and the Boston Bruins. Probably the biggest, most heavy, two-headed monster series that we have here in the first round. I mean, I don't think that there's two teams that are better that are going up against each other. Truly the ultimate coin flip in my mind between these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, the big story for me, right, is Zdeno Chara, Washington Capitals. He's heading back to Beantown here. And so, what's going to be the story there? Is Big Z going to take it easy, not lay the body on some of his former teammates here? Is he going to go balls out because this is likely his last run too?
I don't know about that, dude. I don't think this is his last run by any stretch. The way that he's looked, he's been so good. He's been so important for the Washington Capitals this year. I don't see him hanging up the jersey. I mean, the way that he's been playing, I think he could just, sign another close to league minimum. Maybe he stays in Washington, maybe he goes somewhere else, but he's been pretty good and very effective for Washington. I mean, Zdeno Chara is just, there's no one like him. There may never be another player like him in our lifetime. Probably, we'll probably never see some 6'9" Norris Trophy winning defenseman ever again. I mean,
yeah, he's an enigma, that's for sure.
Right. So I think when he leaves Boston, he goes to a new team, Washington, and you kind of figure out how you can use him and how effective he can be as long as he's protected. I mean, that's really the key, is finding him the right pairing, putting him out in the right situations. And if you can do that, I mean, Zdeno Chara is, even if he just killed penalties, and that's all he did. He played like 8 minutes a game and killed penalties. He'd probably still be a pretty important player on that team.
Yeah.
So I really like what Chara has brought. However, there just seems to be a little bit of a, like, everything has kind of been weird and crazy for Washington. This season has kind of had a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and best moment of the season, I think, for the Capitals, TJ Oshie getting that hat trick after his dad passed away. Just so great to see. But when I look at the way this team's played and the Alex Ovechkin injury, I know that he actually managed to make it through a full game, but I wonder about it. Obviously he's coming back for the playoffs. He's not going to miss a game in the playoffs, but if Alex Ovechkin is anything short of the Alex Ovechkin that the Washington Capitals have come to rely on, this is going to be a really hard series for Washington to win, in my mind.
Yeah, and so what I look at is depth, right? And I think right now, obviously, you're looking at the Backstrom line trying to match up against the Bergeron line. And if you go player for player there, you get a little bit of Ovechkin. The difference has got to be right now, David Krejci and Taylor Hall look like they've got the best chemistry in the league. They just are unstoppable right now.
Yeah, Taylor Hall is a different man in Boston.
Yes. And he legit came out and said this is like the best 15-game stretch I've had in my entire career in terms of just having fun playing hockey. And so when I look at Washington, obviously, then you got to look to Kuzi and Mantha, and can those guys match the intensity and skill that Krejci and Hall are going to bring both on both sides of the puck, right? Obviously Hall's not really the defensive-minded type of player, but David Krejci, he's still got it there. He can win faceoffs, and Kuznetsov, you look at him in the circle this year, 41%, not good by any means. And then you look at, obviously his production, 29 points through 41 games, not typical Kuznetsov fetch. And not only that, but we're also hearing rumors already about him possibly being dealt. So who knows what's going on inside that locker room?
Something's happening there.
Yeah, he's already been benched for one game, and so Samsonov, again, same character issue there too. And so we got Craig Anderson backing up Vanacek right now, and so what?
Yeah, Vanacek's been good too.
He's been all right.
And I think regardless of who's in the net for the Washington Capitals, I think I'm taking Tuukka Rask all day long.
I'm taking Yaroslav Halak all day long over either one of those guys. There's no comparison right now when you look at goaltending depth. So even Swayman, if God forbid something happens to both those guys and Swayman comes in, I actually would rather take him at this point. So, but again,
he's been outrageous in his 10 games. 1.50 goals against, a 9.45 save percentage. Yeah, I don't think that he's going to see any playoff time, but
no, probably not. But again, if you had to, check off the boxes, the biggest concern for me from Washington side is that depth scoring. Are they going to get Lars Eller, Connor Sheary? Are these guys going to step up and, be the difference here? And to me, I don't see it right now. I just really don't see it. Boston's coming in so hot right now with that second line of Taylor Hall and Krejci. I don't see how Washington can match up.
Yeah, Washington is 7-2-1 in their last 10, but that paints a very deceptive picture because they have not been that good over those 10 games. Whereas Boston, some of it, Boston not even playing all. Boston didn't dress like 10 of their regulars or something like that in the last game. Right. So, some of these games have been useless for the Bruins after they knew where they were going to be slotted. So, I wonder if Washington can handle their depth. It's the one thing that Boston now really has. Like, Boston is a lot like Pittsburgh. To get Taylor Hall in your top 6 for nothing is just ridiculous. But they have slowly built up their depth over the last couple of years. And, they might be an even better team than the team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals a couple of years ago. So, especially with Krejci playing the way that he's playing. He's got a new lease on life. And honestly, the one thing that maybe scares me for Washington, David Pastrnak has just been okay at scoring goals. I mean, he won the Rocket last year, and he didn't, like, he's still shooting well, 11.4%. Like, he's still doing all the right things. He had point per game. He had 20 goals in 48 games, but holy smokes. What if David Pastrnak comes alive? Because he has been very good in the playoffs. And I don't think that Washington can handle him. I don't even think it's going to be close. Even though this series looks like it's supposed to be this juggernaut series, I wonder if Boston could win this in 5 games. I won't say that as my prediction. I'm going to say Boston in 6 because 5 games, it just doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm like offending Ovechkin if I say that, but I'm going Boston in 6 because I don't like an unhealthy Ovechkin. I don't like their goaltending, and I think Boston's just going to be too much for them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Boston takes this, but this is my bold prediction here. I'm saying a Boston sweep right now.
Oh, a Boston sweep.
A Boston sweep.
Wow, that would be... I thought about saying that, and I pulled to 5, and then I pulled to 6, so you've got more cojones than I. Okay, a Boston sweep over Washington. That would be a pretty huge crumbling of a team if that were to happen. I guess we'll both run with our tails between our legs if Washington wins the series. I hope that it's the juggernaut series that everyone is kind of expecting and talking about. I just don't know if Washington has the depth to really handle Boston in a 7-game series. Okay, shall we move on to the North Division?
Let's do it.
Let's talk Leafs Montreal. First time these two teams are playing each other since 1979. It has been 42 years since these two teams faced off against each other in the playoffs. Some of that because they were in different conferences for a while, but they have been in the same division for a bit and never found each other in the playoffs. And here we go. Definitely I'll say a large talent gap between the top-end guys of the Leafs and the top-end guys of Montreal. But I do think that Montreal actually has very comparable depth to the Leafs top to bottom. Maybe better depth than the Leafs have in terms of who's playing on that third, that fourth line for Montreal. And so, while I think that Toronto is definitely the better team, I don't think there's any doubt about that there's more talent on the Leafs. I think that Montreal is going to surprise people with how well they're going to play in this series.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with you there. Because one, like you said, I think Montreal looks like a team that's got a second line team up and down, right? I mean, you look up in the first through the third line there, these are basically second line players, but they're so well balanced and they're so well coached sometimes that I just, it doesn't matter what line they roll out there. Now, again, they've got great guys on the back end, and, that definitely helps. But, when I look at Montreal, the one thing I look at is, especially with that forward group, and when you talk about the difference in terms of talent level there, Montreal's got quite a few guys that are on expiring deals. And so you've got a lot of guys who are looking to cash in, so to speak. And so obvious names like Thomas Tatar, Philip Deneau, Eric Stahl, these guys, even Kotkaniemi, again, guys that want to prove themselves. And how about
who was
Cole
very
Caulfield,
good, who was very good in the bubble last year, Kotkaniemi.
Yes. And how about Cole Caulfield? They get another weapon for the playoffs. Now, again, I haven't read if they're, planning to use him heavily in the playoffs or if they're just going to, give him a little bit of taste. But 3 goals through 9 games, maybe he, again, gets that taste of the playoffs and just, explodes. But, again, when you look at Toronto's team up front, obviously they've got guys, on those first 2 lines that can score. They've got, maybe 3 potential, 40 goal scorers there. So, man, it's going to be tough to match up with that when you look at the forward group. Now, the concern for me, obviously, for both these teams, I won't call it a concern, but the question mark is goaltending.
Sure.
Because is Freddie Anderson starting, or are they going to go to Jack Campbell, who's been pretty good for them? Or, Montreal?
By pretty good, do you mean he's lost 2 games all year? Out of 2 games in regulation out of 21. He's won 17 games, 9.23 save percentage, 2.11 goals against. I mean, he has been fantastic. And I don't think that there's any way that Freddie Anderson starts in the playoffs. Now,
well, I mean, here's the thing. If you're saying moving forward, Jack Campbell's your guy, and you're moving on from Freddie Anderson, this is the time to say so, right?
Well, they already basically did in the offseason last year when they said, well, we can't really move him. They couldn't find anybody that wanted him, really, where they would get enough. So I think they kind of said, well, let's try it again with him, and we'll see what happens. But the way that Campbell's playing, I mean, I don't know how you could say, I mean, Anderson already a free agent at the end of the year. It's not like the Leafs can afford to sign Anderson for any more than what he's making right now. And you'd probably look at him and go, I don't know if you deserve $5 million a year. I think you're probably more like a $3.5 million goaltender now. And that might just have to be what it is. Like when he goes and signs his next deal, I don't think he's getting more than 5. No way.
No, I agree with you. I mean, if there's a team desperate enough, but I don't see it happening.
Maybe $5 million for 2 years, but you're not getting a long-term deal. He's also 31, which for a goaltender goaltenders are weird, but usually this is the age where things start to unravel a little bit. Maybe not completely, but you probably don't have too many good years left, especially with. It seems like Freddie Anderson is always hurting his groin somehow, so that's not good moving forward. But I don't think there's any way that Jack Campbell doesn't start. Now, if the Leafs find themselves down 2-0 and Jack Campbell's been really bad, absolutely they'll go back to Frederik Andersen. I don't think you have any hesitation about playing Frederik Andersen, but you look at the way Jack Campbell's played, and the way that the team plays in front of him is just different. I know that they love Freddie Anderson, but the way that they played in front of Campbell is different than how they've played in front of Anderson, and he has reaped the benefits. He deserves to be there. He deserves to start and be given the opportunity to see if he can be the guy that can win it. And if he does really well, the Leafs win a couple rounds and he's their goalie. I mean, then next year you don't need to panic. You don't have to bring back Frederik Andersen at an inflated contract. You can go out, you can find 1 or 2 goalies. You could keep David Rittich if you want. You can kind of patch together a couple guys to back him up, and suddenly, Jack Campbell at $1.6 million looks pretty darn good as a starting goalie. A pretty darn good deal by Kyle Dubas for the Leafs. But I think when all is said and done, the Montreal Canadiens, a very deep team, but the Leafs are so much deeper because of their high-end talent at the top. I mean, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, John Tavares, William Nylander. It's almost like it doesn't end when it comes to the Leafs. I mean, they took Alex Galchenyuk, who everyone kind of thought, well, this guy's career is practically over. And they bring him in and have made him he's a pretty effective player playing with John Tavares. He's able to move up and down the lineup. He's got 11 points in 24 games. I mean, he's basically on like a pretty close to a 40-point season. And I think they got him off waivers. So they've been able to take players that other teams don't want. And you know what? All this, they added Nick Foligno. They have Zach Hyman. Both those guys have been out for a little while. Nick Foligno hasn't really made his mark yet on this team. And come playoff time, that is when both those guys are going to shine. Like, that is the reason that they brought both those players is for the playoffs. And I think that'll be an even bigger boost for the Leafs having a guy like Foligno in there. I just don't see it for Montreal to be able to win this series, but I do think that they could win a couple games and make it a nail biter for the Leafs.
Yeah, I think Montreal's going to try to grind, and honestly, like you talked about, Foligno, Hyman, I think those guys are going to be so key for Toronto. to be able to get past the series where you can finally say, we've got a little bit of edge, right? Wayne Simmons, they've got these guys who can grind a little bit with you too, and then they'll just go over the top with you with great great offense there. So is Montreal going to be able to keep up? I think not.
Yeah. It'll still be a good series, even if it's a 4-game sweep by the Leafs. I think that it'll still be pretty close. I think Montreal will play them very hard. They're a hard-working team. You won't be able to sleep any night. No game's going to be easy, and that always makes for a fun first round. Okay, let's go to the last North playoff series.
Oh, wait. We got to make our predictions
My
here.
God.
Come on.
I'm saying Toronto in 6.
Okay. Well, I think for once we'll agree. I'll take Toronto in 6 as well.
Okay. All right. On to Edmonton and Winnipeg. Probably at the beginning of this year, if you were going to say, okay, Edmonton's going to make the playoffs, which out of these 4 teams that made the playoffs, Edmonton was probably the one that was on the least amount of people's playoff picks. A lot of people had Vancouver in there. I think I did. A lot of people had Calgary. And at the beginning of the year, it just didn't look like Edmonton would have the depth, but maybe they'd squeak in on that 4th seed. But Edmonton has been much better than expected, and Winnipeg has really fallen apart in the back half of this season. Now, fortunately, they were first in this division at one point. Now it's playoff time. Everything's reset. This is the series that Winnipeg could win this whole thing and they could be in the semifinals. Like they could totally, playoffs come and everything clicks for them. Connor Hellebuck is unbelievable, and away goes Winnipeg. They beat Edmonton, they beat Toronto, and they go to the conference finals or whatever, the semifinals. But also Edmonton could make quick work of the Winnipeg Jets. Like that is how Jekyll and Hyde this year has been for Winnipeg. I have no idea what Winnipeg team is going to show up in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? What team are you going to get? I mean, obviously, we know with Edmonton, right, they've got McDavid who can just steal a game on his own. Same with Draisaitl. These two guys are just incredible to watch. But, it's what forward group are you going to get from Winnipeg? Because, I talked about it at the deadline. I was disappointed that Winnipeg did not address the defense. And so now they've got to basically roll out Morrissey 24/7 to just make sure that Draisaitl and McDavid do not, just explode for outrageous numbers and tear this team apart, because you're going to need Hellebuck to really, help out as well. So can they do it? Do they have the depth on defense to really stay on top of these two, all-stars here? And, I got to wonder, because again, like you talked about, we had basically drastically different teams in Winnipeg all year. They were up and down. And so it's nice, though, lately, Blake Wheeler looks like he's been getting going again. Obviously Mark Scheifele is Mark Scheifele. He's going to be phenomenal. Pierre-Luc Dubois, though, he's the big key for me. He's a guy who I think has a lot of defensive skills that could really help this team out come playoff time. So, is he going to step up and be able to match up with maybe like, say, a Draisaitl, right? But again, is Edmonton going to split these guys up, or are they going to pair them together? I think at first they're going to try to split them up and, see what they can do. But honestly, this is going to be a fun series for me to watch, just because I'm excited to see after the season McDavid and Draisaitl had what they can do in the playoffs now. Because if there's a time for them to take advantage of it, it's now with a Winnipeg team that really has been up and down all year long. Yeah.
Yep. And the one thing about this series, it's like one of the only series that's really going to be out west. You're going to have Vegas and Colorado, and then there's really no other series, and that's only if when Vegas and Colorado are actually playing at home. So this series will be entirely played like that Mountain Time. I know Winnipeg is the Central Time, but it'll be a little bit later. It'll be easier to watch this game, whereas all these other games are Eastern Time Zone games. This one will be a little bit easier to watch, and it'll be a fun series, because I think no matter what, Winnipeg is going to throw their body around. They're going to see if they can probably put the hurt on Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't know if they'll ever catch Connor McDavid, but the other thing that we haven't even touched on yet is the fact that Mike Smith the guy's having a Vezina Trophy season. And we talk about Winnipeg having fantastic goaltending, which Hellebuck is a top 5 goalie in the NHL all the time. But and Mike Smith has been unbelievable. Maybe the best year of his entire career, coming at age 39, something like that.
Yep, 39. My goodness.
It's not like this has been the McDavid Draisaitl show and that's it. They're getting help. That's why they're winning. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl have been about this good for a while, but they just had no help. And now finally they're getting production outside of those two guys, i.e. their goaltending. Like that's what they needed. They needed their goaltending to be really good. And this is the first year since Cam Talbot had that really good year that they're getting great goaltending. And that's made all the difference for this Oilers team. So, while they still don't have that depth at forward, it's certainly made up by the guy who has there are 183 points between two guys.
Yeah, that's insane.
Whereas, that's between two guys, and most teams don't even have one guy with 60 points.
I know, and it's funny. I read hopefully I'm remembering this correctly, but Connor McDavid in the last 14 games, has more points than any player through the entire season from the New Jersey Devils. Just that alone is crazy to me. In
14 games, it just shows you how god awful the New Jersey Devils are. But
that too.
The Devils are. We'll be doing a postseason moratorium on the Devils because that one will be fun. But yeah, because the top scorer for the Devils, Pavel Zacha, 35 points. Pretty great year there for the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. Prediction: Edmonton, Winnipeg. Who do you think's walking away with this?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Edmonton. To be quite honest, I think when it comes down to it, I think yes, Winnipeg's got the depth, and I think, Hellebuck can stand on his head all he wants, but I think ultimately it's just that McDavid Draisaitl machine is too much for him, and I think in 7 games Edmonton will squeak this one out.
I agree. I think we're going to see, for the first time, and maybe the only time, Austin Matthews versus Connor McDavid.
Oh my, wouldn't that be lovely?
It is going to be it will be potential, unless these two teams play each other in the Stanley Cup Finals, which is possible. Certainly, it's possible. You have two of the best players in the whole league. It's possible they eventually play each other in the finals, but that's a very rare matchup. The same two teams just don't make it to the finals very often. So this could be the only time that it happens, and that would be a doozy of a series. I think it would just be a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm gonna also go Edmonton, but I think that Winnipeg's gonna push it. I think we're going 7 games, and I think in that game 7, Connor McDavid goes ham. And,
all right,
I think that the Oilers will wear down the Jets. I think that the Jets can keep pace early on with like you're saying, Josh Morrissey, he can play a lot. He can play high minutes, and that's fine. But you get deep into a 7-game series, and that's not going to work as well. And McDavid it's going to be like the football team that, you run the ball a ton in the first quarter, and you just, you're not scoring a bunch. The score's low, but you're moving the ball, and you're running, and you're wearing the defense down. They're on the field for a long time, and then bam, everything breaks through, and nobody's got energy in the back half of the game, and it's a blowout because of what you did in the first quarter. And I see that being the case for Edmonton in this series against Winnipeg.
Yep.
Okay, well, the West Division has yet to be decided. I think that if I'm a betting man, I'm saying that Vegas is going to take that top spot. I think the LA Kings are going to have they get to play Colorado twice. I know they've got nothing to play for, but kind of neither does Colorado. Does it really matter? Do you want to play St. Louis in round 1? Not really. Do you want to play Minnesota in round 1? No, I don't want to play either team in round 1. So to me, I'm just going to go, you know what? I'm going to rest McKinnon. I'm going to rest, everyone else is resting their guys. I think it's time to just rest players because I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters who you play in the first round. And with crowds being limited anyways, I don't know that it matters that much if you have home ice. I guess, you look at some of these home records and teams have been doing very well at home, except for St. Louis. They're terrible at home. They're 10, 11, and 5. They're probably the only playoff team with a losing record in the playoffs. No, Winnipeg as well. So, Winnipeg could win their game and make me wrong. But anyways, I think that it's maybe overblown. If I were Colorado, I'd be much more concerned about let's give these guys a rest. Let's rest Grubauer. Let's not let things get out of hand. We don't need anybody getting hurt because no matter who we play, we need McKinnon to win. We will not win without Nathan McKinnon. So that's my thought about this division. I think we're going to go Vegas, St. Louis, Colorado, Minnesota. That's what I think. But we'll break it all down once it's official. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for our breaking down of each team's individual season as they become eliminated from the playoffs. If you haven't heard Buffalo and Anaheim, we did those ones already, so you can go back and listen to those. Justin, any final thoughts headed into the playoffs before we sign off today?
Boy, I'm just excited to get going.
Oh.
That's all I can say. Whew.
It seems like the longest season ever, even though it's been a shortened season.
Yes. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay, well, we will talk to you guys soon. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Hit us up. Let us know what you think, and we will talk to you soon.